Hello, so this is going to be the training for the CEO dashboard. And there's a few things that I want to help explain about the mindset of tracking this information in the first place, because really that's what we need to grasp, so it makes this a lot easier to be able to implement, right? So when we look at KPIs, the biggest thing is that data should always drive action. And while there is an infinite amount of data and analytics that we could look at for any business at any time, we don't always need to. We need to measure what's going to matter most. And like the old saying goes, what gets measured gets managed, right? So we want to measure the things that are going to get us the biggest ROI or return on investment or the results that we ultimately want, right? And so when we're setting up the CEO dashboard, no two companies' dashboards are going to look the same. And there are a lot of softwares out there where this stuff could be tracked automatically through a software, but there's a level of intentionality that you lose out on with that. And because softwares will connect to so many different platforms these days, it's going to measure a lot of stuff. And what I find is that a lot of people start getting lost in the volume and they don't really do anything different because there's so much there, they don't know where to start. And so we want to keep this simple, we want to keep it intentional. And so I'm going to go through what these columns mean and what the rows mean and how to set this up so that it really aligns with the goals of the company and your client results journey. And the reason is that we want to really enhance and refine that client results journey, because that's what is adding to our bottom line, right? That's what's allowing us to be able to grow and to expand our team and all kinds of things, right? So we want the KPIs to align with what are the overall goals of the company, and then what are things that we need to measure in tandem with our client results journey that are going to help us to make sure that we are doing what we're achieving the results for our clients, our patients, our customers that we want, and for our team as well, right? So when we look at this dashboard, again, this is a leadership tool as well. So this, again, I want to emphasize that this is meant to drive actions. This is meant to help us to be clear on where we should spend our time and energy, because that is our most finite resource and our most valuable resource, and we want to minimize the time that we waste so that we can enhance the results and get them sooner, right? And so we want to be able to focus and have simplicity here. And so when we are building this out, we want to make sure that we have targets. And so we have set goals and that we have targets to go along with those, and that we're looking at this on a week-to-week basis. Because if we wait if we're going a month at a time, there's so much time in there that you lose traction. And so staying up on this week to week allows us to be able to have a better pulse on the company without having to be into the details of every department, right? So this gives us a high level overview. And what I love about this and how it's a leadership tool is that it holds people accountable. So one of the things you'll see over here is the owner or the role that is in charge of this. And I'll explain a little bit more about this in a moment. But I love this feature because it helps us to know who should we be holding accountable for this, whether the results are good, they're consistent, or they're not what we want them to be, right? And then that just makes this, again, so much simpler. So the first thing that I want to go through is that you're going to have a tab, since we're going to be doing this on a weekly basis, but you have each month within here. What you want to do maybe is set up a baseline for this or a template, but you're really just going to be able to copy this over. So when you're setting this up, you want to make sure that this has everything on it that you're going to want, and then as far as KPIs that you're going to track, your targets and so on and so forth. And then you're just going to copy this tab down here over. Now, if you're using Google Sheets for this, it's going to look a little bit different, but it's still going to give you all of the same options, okay? Now, one of the things I have noticed sometimes when these sheets get copied over is sometimes the formatting can get lost. So just as long as you understand how to reset your numbers up here, maybe this is measuring $1, but you copy the tab and it resets it to a percentage for whatever reason. Technology is weird. Then you'll just have to reset your formatting. So something to pay attention to that I've noticed over time. So you'll have naming conventions are so important for systems and scalability and for consistency, right? And so I like to use a consistent naming convention. And so we usually do the month and the 2-digit month and the 4-digit year for these. You can do that however you want, just whatever you end up doing for that naming convention on this, make sure that it is consistent. And so one last thing as far as the overall setup of this is that when you are setting up your KPIs and you're tracking KPIs, whether they are leading or lagging. And what I mean by leading KPIs, key performance indicators, or lagging key performance indicators, is that we want to have a good mix of both that are going to measure our actions and that are going to measure our results. Because the thing at the end of the day, our results are a result of actions that we take. And if we're not clear on what actions we're taking to get a result, then it's going to be hard to be able to replicate that and do it consistently, right? So I like to have KPIs that are a combination of actions that we're taking or inputs and then outputs or results, right? So that'll just kind of guide like what you set in here, because again, this is, you can modify this however you want. Now, obviously, you're going to update the weeks on these each time you have a new month. Not a big deal. When we're setting this up, I like to have the week 1 is going to be the first full week of the month, and so you got to determine what day of the week does your week start on. For some people it's Monday to Saturday, for some people it's Monday to Sunday, for some people it's Sunday to Saturday. So just being really clear on that for consistency's sake as well, because that's also going to determine when you go to pull your data to update it for this, what time period are you pulling that for. And so you're going to have almost every single month, other than like February perhaps, is going to have a remainder over here. So you're going to have 3, 4, 5 days of the month that weren't a nice even week. And so you're just going to put that into here, right? The next thing on here, this is going to be a little drop down, is you're going to have a metric type. There are only 2 metric types on this dashboard. There is total and then there is average. And based off of what you choose for this is going to update how this is calculated over here. So you don't actually want to touch this. This is a formula in here, just like this drop down box, but that will change how you enter that. So if I change this to average here, notice how it updates that monthly actual to $1, because all of these are $1, right? So I'm going to change that back to total. And you'll want to make sure that when you have a number convention in here, that it's consistent all the way across. And so if you have dollars here, but maybe it doesn't look right here, make sure it's not a number or a percentage. And just like in Google Sheets or in Excel, you can hit that drop down here and change this. You can also right click on this and go to format cells. If you're going to do this for multiple cells, say these are all going to be dollars, right? You could actually go down here to format cells and change this perhaps to accounting. You don't want any decimals on there maybe, and maybe you do want to have the dollar sign in there. You can select that, and that's going to apply that formatting to all of those. So that can save you a little bit of time. So you're going to have the metric type on here, and then that's going to automatically calculate the actual. Now, very important component of this that I think is where one area that goals often fall short is because we don't set targets around those things. And so when we're measuring something, we want to have a benchmark for what we're measuring it against, right? And so assuming that you are doing business planning right, and maybe you just got done with your quarterly initiatives, one of the things that you want to go in here and do is update your monthly targets. Now, when you go through and you're doing your quarterly business planning, sometimes your CEO dashboard may update the KPIs that you're tracking with that. That's why this is important as part of that quarterly planning process. You may want to go into your dashboard and see, are we going to change anything that we're measuring based on what our core initiatives are? Because a lot of times that's going to be the case, especially when it comes to core initiatives. We want to have measurable inputs and outputs as a result of a core initiative that's going to help us move the needle. So your CEO dashboard is where you're going to want to measure the progress toward that, right? And so the next thing you have over here is status. And so this is something that you're going to update on a weekly basis when you are updating your target. And how you're going to know what your status needs to be updated to is going to be based on your target completion. Okay, so if our target for revenues is $80,000 for the month, and we're 50% of the way through the month, and we're only at $30,000 in revenue, then we're going to know that we need to update this status. Now, the way that you know how to update the status is that there is a legend down here to correspond with those. Now, you may want to modify these based off of your own company and your inputs and the way that this makes sense for you. But at the end of the day, we want these statuses to be updated. Hopefully you don't have a lot of critical items, and ideally you would have a lot of hit or exceeded, but things that maybe it needs improvement, and you've got a few things that need improvement, but you've got one KPI on here that is in critical shape, and it's like we have to work on this post haste, right? So that's the goal of this, is that when our eyes see color, it helps to direct our attention, and when these things vary like that, right? And so if you all have these 5 different statuses, and if you want to, and if you understand how to manipulate spreadsheets for Excel, you can certainly go through this yourself and change this. Maybe you consolidate this down to where you just have 3 different statuses on here. That is totally fine. I just want to be clear on, okay, if this is a critical status, what does that mean for the actions that we're taking? If this is on a needs improvement status, what does that mean for the actions that we're taking? Because you're going to be looking at this on a weekly basis. You're going to be meeting with your team to review this information, right? And so when you are updating the status, you want to be able to leave that meeting with a clear action plan, like, hey, so-and-so is in charge of this KPI and it's in critical condition down here. So I need to be able to have an action plan today that when we talk about this again a week from now, I have some kind of update on how we're improving this to where it's not critical anymore, right? So we want that to be meaningful update. And then again, the target completion, this is a formula as well. So you're not going to touch this, and this will know your target completion based off of that monthly target versus actual. And then the next thing that you're going to have on here is the owner or the role that is in charge of that KPI. So sometimes it may be the business owner, sometimes it might be a manager. You know, if we are measuring actual team member performance perhaps, then you're going to hold Anna accountable for this pre-book rate, right? But then maybe for the product sales, looking at who did we put in charge of for initiatives around that. Is that something that marketing is really driving the engagement around a certain treatment or product sale or a service that we are trying to sell? What is really responsible for making sure we achieve that goal? And so being intentional again about that, and this is where the leadership really comes into play, because no one person should be in charge for all of this information, all of these actions, and all of these results. That's why we want to divvy this up so that it makes it simpler, and then it helps everybody stay on the same page, right? The next thing that you're going to have on here is the metric source. And so this is simply, where are you getting this information from in the first place? Now, one of the things that I want to share with you is that when you initially start doing this and you are working out the kinks, you're probably going to have some data that's not accurate, and you're not going to realize it until you get a few weeks down the road, maybe even a few months, and you're like, something is just telling me that this information is not right. That is still great to know, because it tells us, if we know where the source of that data is coming from, it may be that if it's coming from technology or another software or platform or something like that, maybe we are not using that software properly, and so that is a good thing, because that's going to help us to refine processes. So bad data can be good in some circumstances, because it helps us to have insight on what are some things we need to work on. And then just also making sure that we are consistently getting the same information from the same place all the time. So we want to be really clear. And if somebody else takes over entering this information, we want to be really clear, this is where you're going to go get that, so it's easy to pick up and leave off. So inputting this information never relies solely on one person, although generally we're going to have one person that is going to retrieve a lot of this data and enter it in here. It does make this simpler, so that in the event that team member's out for that week for vacation, somebody else can go in and update this CEO dashboard and get that data without having to wonder, where did we get it from? And then one of the things also that you may note on here is you might have something that people just need to know as it relates to this KPI that we're tracking, or if we're looking at this for the 3rd week of the month and we have a note in particular to where, maybe we really had a huge spike in revenues for the 3rd week of the month. We may want to make notes on what was this attributed to, right? Did we have an event, or did we have some kind of marketing that really took off for us, right? Or was it something that happened that a few months ago that we're just now seeing the benefit from? Those things are extremely helpful, and especially as you start to pick up and you have several months worth of data that you've tracked, and you can see the progress that you've made with, like revenues. We're always going to be tracking revenues, and you're able to start noticing that progress and the growth of that without having to go and pull up a bunch of financial statements all the time. Then those notes can be very helpful in being able to see how has this trend evolved, right? And one of the things I want to go back to on the metric source is that if you have some of the metric sources, some of these are going to be a formula. So for instance, if we're measuring average revenue per client, so we have seen, and maybe you can change this terminology if you see patients, if you see customers, however you want that to look. You can update that terminology there. But if we're looking at revenues over a week-long period and we brought in $15,000 in revenues for that week and we saw 50 clients, then what you can have that do is we want to know what our average revenue per client is, perhaps because we really want to make sure that our clients are staying committed to their client results journey, to the transformation that they wanted, right? And maybe this is generally like a 12-month plan. And we know that in order for them to get the best results, they have to stay committed and they need to be more valuable. So we want to make sure that they are investing in the products, in the treatments, and the services that we know would help them achieve their desired results, right? So we're not chasing a bunch of people for one-off services, perhaps. We want to make our current clients more valuable. And so maybe we're measuring the average revenue per client. Well, that's simply going to be the revenues divided by the patients or the clients seen for that week. So this is going to be a formula. And so you're going to enter the data in here, but maybe this is what or maybe this doesn't, you don't enter anything in here at all. After you have entered the revenues and the clients seen, this automatically calculates for you, right? And so if this is a formula, in those instances in there, and what you can do if that is something where you have this more than once, right? Maybe you're manually calculating your conversion rate in here instead of just entering the percentage or something. You can put that in here and just drag that across. Oh, don't move it, drag it. Drag that across, and then that takes care of that for you. And so that formula over here in the notes section is what I would recommend putting that formula so that it's clear, because you'll be able to see it here, but it just helps sometimes to have the words that go out there with it. Now, with all of that said and done, then that's like the overview of what to do with each of these columns of information. Now, I have some sections on here. Again, customize this to where it's going to make the most impact for you. Again, we want it to drive actions and to drive your ability to be a better leader, right? So we have sections on here: evergreen metrics, sales and ops, marketing, patient success support or client or customer success support, and then people and culture. So I've seen this go so many different ways. What I generally like to follow is to go in the flow of how people would come through our ecosystem, right? So we're going to have evergreen metrics. These are things that we are consistently going to measure these things, no matter if we are a $500,000 company, $1 million company, a $10 million company. We want to know these things. And so this is probably not ever going to change, or if it does, it's going to be very rare. Now, these things around like sales and ops and marketing, these things will likely change more often to align with your core initiatives, especially as the company evolves and grows. The things that you're going to measure are going to evolve and grow, right? Because what got you here will not get you there. And so when looking at these sections, I usually don't like to measure any more than about 3 KPIs per section. But if you're not measuring, or department rather, so I think about these sections in terms of business departments. So usually you're going to have marketing as a business department, you're going to have sales as a business department, you're going to have operations as a department, you might have human resources if you're measuring something on here related to that. Maybe you've had a lot of turnover and you've got a bigger team and you really want to minimize that amount of turnover. So maybe you have some HR KPIs that you're checking out on here. You could also use the CEO dashboard just for a department only. So say marketing is going to go through and just use this dashboard only for marketing related initiatives. So we're looking at KPIs related to Instagram and email and ads and a referral project that we have going on right now. You could totally use this for that too. And that's why I love this, because it is so customizable. So when you're looking at this, and this isn't really in the order I would prefer, but if we were looking at this, I would have this go through the flow of my client results journey, right? So maybe we're looking at marketing first, and then we're looking at sales. And so when it comes to marketing, for instance, maybe some of those things I just mentioned, you're looking at KPIs around what's our email open rate, how many people engaged with the reels that we posted last week. So we want to measure like engagement within a 7-day period or something like that. Those are marketing. opportunities. And then maybe we know that we are having a sales event right now where if people buy a certain package, they get some other promotion with it, right? And so they're not getting the delivery of the service right now, but we are selling them something right now. So maybe we're looking at sales of certain packages. And then when it comes to operations, perhaps maybe we're looking at how many treatments did we actually provide with the Opus device or with this piece of equipment or this asset, whatever the case may be. Maybe we're looking at no-shows and cancellations as part of operations. And so, again, keep this simple. I just wanted to give you some food for thought in there on what you could be tracking and how to organize this for yourself. Now, you could easily go in here and cut these and move them around. Actually, let me show you an example just in case you are learning to be more Excel savvy. So insert cut cell. So I just moved that around. Super simple. One of the things too is that maybe you have 4 KPIs for marketing that you want to measure. Then insert that new cell right here, and you can just drag all of this stuff down to where it'll go right into this, and then that way that'll be the same. You may have to update, this section or something. But if you add this right here, then it may not, sometimes it doesn't work the same if you add it at the bottom. So I just wanted to show you that in case you need to move some cells around, because sometimes the formatting can get lost depending on how things are inserted or how they're lost here. And so hopefully that makes sense. Again, just make sure that these things are things that align with ultimately what our focus is right now. And that's again why I love this. It helps us to be more intentional. And when we're using this information, obviously the value of being able to have comparative information to look at, but being intentional when we look at this information, what are we doing to change our actions today to get better results for tomorrow?